Well, hello everybody. Welcome to Aquarius Rising Africa. And I'm very, very happy to welcome back with us again Caleb Jade and of course Mornay. How are you guys doing?
Doing good.
Good,
Awesome.
good.
Well, Caleb, it's just so good to have you back again,
Yes.
really. And I must say, before we even get going into what we're going to be chatting about this week, in this week's chat, it's really amazing to me to see how our viewers have appreciated your story. I know it's been particularly difficult for you to start sharing. And I want to just again say thank you for that because I think it's so eye opening. It takes things to a whole new level again. We've been hearing things for a long time, and it's so good to come across someone like yourself who's been through these horrific experiences and literally been to hell, literally, and come back, and here you are sharing your story. So thank you for that again, and just want to say welcome back and really good to have you. How are you doing, Caleb?
Well, aside from the usual aches and pains, I'm doing pretty good.
Awesome. How are you feeling about sharing and speaking? How's that working for you? I mean, just as a matter of interest.
I wish that my voice was back. This isn't my normal voice, but apparently people can understand me. So,
Yeah, I do believe I do believe we could all understand you. We could all hear you. So yeah, it's really good. Anyway, when we go back to the past few weeks again, we go back to your gateway experience, and then the wild hunt, which was wow, such a horrific, traumatic experience for anyone, let alone a 10-year-old child. And Charlotta, who took her own life to give you yours, that absolute unselfish act, I think is so amazing. Um, but you also touched on, which I found very interesting, that whole Star Wars sort of scenario playing itself out now, which was again interesting because a few weeks before that on our shows with Jessie Zabota, she was actually decoding Michael Aquino's book. Can't remember, but I think it's Firecrackers with Aquino. Is it? Or we call the show Firecrackers with Aquino. You're on mute.
I mean, Fire Force. Sorry, I was like
Oh,
Fire
right.
Force.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then she also went through how they use, how they weaponize the kids. And like literally, Star Wars is not a fairy tale, it's very real. And you were saying as well how after the pain of losing her, they kind of made you believe that you could resurrect her again, right? Um, and I think just that pain, that sorrow must have taken you to some incredible places, and I can't imagine they were very nice within yourself, within this whole evil system. Do you mind expanding for us a bit more and maybe sharing with us how that happened for you? What were the trainings you received after that, as you stepped up the ladder, so to speak? And if you can just, yeah, whatever you're able to share from there onwards.
well, if you've ever had any children, you'd understand that children are pretty intuitive to begin with because they're always learning something. They're always trying to figure out something, even if it's bad. Some of the best dad advice I ever heard was from a guy that said, "Next time, don't." So that's something you would tell your children. You can't guide their every single step every single day, but you can definitely provide some barriers or guidelines. Well, in this case, barriers and guidelines weren't designed for anything good, it was for bad. It sounds strange to say that now because at the time I thought it was good. So it's a flipping of the roles for sure. And they didn't put us into this organized schooling right off the bat. They just kind of let us have our head, I guess, like a horse. You just let a horse run through the pasture, and the horse gets to do whatever it wants inside that fence line. So that's kind of what they did to us. And what they put out in that pasture was a bunch of games, books, materials with quote occultic end quote guys, I guess you want to say. So does that make any sense?
Absolutely, it does. Absolutely, it does. So it's like the way I understand it. And I'm going to reprimand myself again because I know that we really have agreed that we'd like to pray before we start the show. So I'm going to ask you now, before we go into that stuff, if you could just start for us in prayer, please.
Sure.
Thank you.
Heavenly Father, we thank you for today. We thank you for another beautiful day that we get to be a part of. We still can make our choices. We can still choose right from wrong. Your Spirit still works amongst us. So we just give you honor and praise for being who you are. Thank you for the food that we eat. Thank you for the opportunities that you present. And help us grow our faith so that we can believe that you're always there for us. That you own everything in this universe. And you will give to us what we need when we need it. And if we ask for it, just have to have the faith. So protect us from anything that's going to want to attack us, discourage us, or anything else. I just ask that in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Amen. Thank you for that. Okay, what I think I heard you say there was, of course, you put in this, it's almost like it reminds me of canned hunting was what they horrifically do in Africa nowadays. They'll put the animals within a confined space and the hunters come there. So there's no ways that the animal can escape. It's kind of like the same thing. You kids are put into a pasture or a contained environment and you fed a bit of this, a bit of that, so you can kind of graze on the things that you enjoy, right? Would that be kind of where we're heading with this?
That'd be the best way to discover how or what the child is interested in, their strengths, what they're going to be good at later. Even if it's everything, it's still showing you the pathway.
Right. Okay. So they would obviously then be watching what, let's say, Smarties you picked up, right? Or what books and things, or where your interest was going thereafter. So I know that you have said to us before, you were born, you have natural gifts anyway, such as, being able to see things, perceiving things a few seconds before they happened. You spoke about being able to levitate when they were doing the gateway with you, that sort of thing. So you obviously always have had these natural abilities. So where did that take you then, along with those abilities? So where were you guided to go from there? And I don't know if the word is guided. That might be the wrong word. Coerced, maybe, or just where did your natural abilities take you that they obviously would have weaponized, right? Thereafter.
Well, I told you about lucid dreaming, where it was normalized for us over those first 5 years of this induction into this lifestyle. It was normalized. So they encouraged us to have lucid dreaming. It wasn't like you hear from remote viewing or anything else like that. It was to experience the spirit world. And we didn't know that it was the spirit world. It was just called a dream. And we began to be introduced to what you might call a guide or guides, the people that we interacted with. At the time, I wasn't sure if it was spirits or if it was humans or what, because some of them appeared pretty fantastically. Like amazing stuff. I mean, just amazing things you wouldn't believe or think that you were able to see. Being able to fly in those dreams and being able to go further and go farther. That was the lure, I think, because you went from being a powerless child that had to face the wild hunt to all of a sudden you're granted all this access to powers you didn't know that you even had. You were given some idea with the gate program, but the further development of it was, it's like going to the gym. You don't know how strong you are until you've been in the gym for 6 months.
Right. Wow. So really just pumping up those muscles, so to speak. Really, yeah, I totally get it. So it was like observing who you were, what your qualities were, seeing that. And if you can maybe just explain to us more about lucid dreaming. When you say yes, it's when you kind of leave your body and you are able to see fantastical things. I actually watched a movie not too long ago, and I don't even remember the name of it. I'm very bad with it. I'm sorry. But literally where these people were doing lucid dreaming, this couple or these two people, and then they swapped bodies. Literally the one went into the other's body. And to the point where the one refused to get out. Is that kind of pushing the edge a bit, or does that type of stuff happen when when lucid dreaming is encouraged as well?
Well, if you got two people who aren't disciplined in the art, because it is an art, you can get caught into something like that where it might not be that they didn't want to get out. Maybe they couldn't get out. They're caught up in the dream and they're stuck there. So they were teaching us to be disciplined with it so that we could pick and choose where we went. We didn't get stuck. Later on, as we talk, some of the schools of magic that you have to attend, that becomes important because it means your life. You live or you die. You can get caught into a time loop. You can get caught into, there's all kinds of strange things out there.
So I want to just go back to the lucid dreaming then. So in the lucid dreaming, you're being taught or encouraged to see beyond the physical realms, obviously, right? That these fantastical creatures exist, that your guides, or I guess even loved ones that have passed away, right? Would that be included in what you can see?
I didn't see any loved ones that passed away that I believed were my loved ones. I think it was just caricature and fakery to get you to believe that.
Right. Okay. So all of this then gets you to see beyond your physical eyes, right? So now they're teaching you that there's a lot beyond the realm of the physical. So is that kind of the grooming for later on when you go? I would imagine this is almost like an initiation. You would go from one step to the other, right? You'd be doing this, get expert at that, doing another thing, becoming an expert in everything that you're doing, really. So when you understand the lucid dreaming and there's all these different amazing, fantastical creatures, these different realms, you get to realize you can access these without difficulty. Is that correct?
That's pretty much exactly what was happening. They wanted us to be disciplined. They wanted us to, at some point, we were going to have control over some of this stuff. And more than just a lucid dream, we're going to be actively participating in these ranks. So they don't want somebody who's weak or who can't function there, or who can't see or who can't grasp what's happening.
Wow. So were you actually interacting with these beings in your lucid dreaming? Were you getting to know them? Were you talking to them? What was that like? Can you explain that to us?
Well, the best way to say it is the old saying, it's not who you know, it's who knows you. And that's kind of what was happening. We were being introduced to these things. They were getting to know us more than us know them. That's how they form those attachments, by the way.
What type of things are we talking here that you came across?
Oh, there was all different sorts and types of strange creatures. We could go on just that subject for probably the next month.
Right. Okay. So different things, and you really just getting to understand that these things exist, and not, and teaching you not to fear them, but for them to get to know you and for you to get to know them. So creating like a bridge between humans and these, I'm going to call them mythical creatures, although they're not really mythical, from what we're hearing. So you're creating that bridge, and from there you expand as well, right?
Yes, that's correct. And they were teaching us the boundaries where we could go within the scope of what we knew. The boundaries were life or death. It wasn't oops, you crossed the line. At some point, this stuff is going to kill you if you go too far.
Ah, wow.
But you have to get close to the sun without melting your wings like Icarus. You have to get close to see it.
So to push your boundaries as far as what you can, really just push, right? Break through the normal mind barriers to see how far you can go, but at the same time, gaining the wisdom, I guess it would be, or the understanding of what not to push beyond. So really teaching you to find that fine line between what you can do and what you can't do. It's not something they determine for you. It's something you determine for yourself, if I'm understanding you correctly.
Simply put, you could say that it was more combining or recombining, because it's been broken since the fall. The body, the soul, and the spirit.
Wow. Get it. Wow, wow, wow. So you get to be back in that aligned state when you move into those places. Is that what you're saying?
In a corrupted way, yes.
Yeah, I understand that it's corrupted. It's not authentic. It's still, but it's there. You can do it. I get it. Okay, so once you've now established the lucid dream, I just want to ask you actually one more question there. These creatures that you met in these places, I mean, were they friendly? Were they malevolent? Were they benevolent? Did you fight with them? Did you play with them? Did you make friends with them? Can you explain that to us? And maybe also just from your peers, how did they experience that from what you remember and what you were maybe told?
Well, in order to try to explain that, you have to understand that there were 9 realms that we know of here. There's a lot more than that, but where other humans have been before in terms of going there. So these are creatures from these places. So they're familiar with humans very well. So it's not like it was an unknown creature that you never heard of. Most of what you hear of these things it's fantasy in this world. It's not real. It's something to just imagine or whatever. Well, not that many years ago, say 250 years ago, those creatures were still here walking on this realm, walking here physically. So,
Wow.
I don't know if that makes any sense, but
yeah,
they weren't necessarily terrifying. But if you've never seen anything like that, of course you're going to be afraid.
Of course. Were you afraid?
Sure it was.
How did you deal with your fear in those realms?
I learned to step back away from that boundary. I learned to come back to myself. And again, it's something you have to exercise. You have to keep going with it, or you're not strong enough for the next phase, the next test, the next exploration, the next whatever they want you to do.
So you got to also learn when to retreat and to understand that as the saying goes, a retreat is not a defeat, right? So to be able
Correct.
to retreat, you know you need to, and then go back into battle, so to speak, or go out there on a voyeur journey to see what's out there. But yeah, I get it. So it's slowly but surely expanding. I
Well,
want to just there's
something. Sorry.
sorry. No, carry on. Please carry on.
Some things that they used to do with other people, not necessarily me, but I saw this happen, is these creatures would recreate something in your life. And that was kind of a temptation to just stay there. So they'd create a negative loop, like a negative feedback loop where you just get stuck. That's what I call a time loop. So you could live that same day over and over and over and over and over and over. So you could have if it was a pleasant memory for you, you could live that forever if you wanted to. And they're not going to discourage you from that because they'll just use your energy. They'll take your body over and use your energy. They'll capture you in a soul gem, a soul crystal.
Wow.
Wow. I look forward to talking about that at a future stage,
Soul
because that
crystals.
soul gems, yeah. I know you touched on that a little bit last week, and I know we're going to go deeper into it sometime in the future as well. But yeah, that's very interesting. So that you would then go into that place and just, as you say, like Groundhog Day. And I know one of the viewers was actually asking about the time loop, and so I can't see who that was, but Caleb's obviously just answered that question, which is like Groundhog Day, just going round and round, enjoying the same thing, not being able to get out of it. But then exactly, they'll capture you there and then use your body and then keep draining your energy for their nefarious purposes. Wow. And as you say, in the soul gem. Lyra is asking something here. What were some of the checks and balances while you were in a lucid dream? So were you able to, check and balance in a lucid dream?
Well, at first, it was just unfettered. We could do basically what we wanted, but it was a small playground at first. And as it expanded, your spirit, mind, and body are starting to come back together. You learn to just wake yourself up if it gets too real. Your mind isn't asleep, but your body is. So you come back to your body, you learn to guard it.
Wow.
They can't actually take your body or your soul unless you agree to it.
Yeah, true. Wow. That's amazing. Now, how old were you at this stage when all this was going on, when you were doing the lucid dreaming, that sort of thing? What age were you now?
We just went right into it after that wild hunt experience from 10 to about 15.
Okay, cool. So once you'd kind of waxed the lucid dreaming, so to speak, what was the next step for you after that?
Well, it was active initiation into some of the schools of magic. You had to take a trial to get into them.
What does that mean?
If you ever watched, I'm trying to think of the movie here, Constantine, the card at the door to the club, that type of thing. If there wasn't a card with a frog on it, it was runes on the walls and floors. If you couldn't see them, you weren't ready.
So you obviously could see them at this stage. Obviously, your sight, your foresight, whatever is, would that be the word? Foresight, insight, psychic abilities, foresight, right? Was obviously quite developed. So, who determined which area or which school of magic you were going into? Was that obviously they would have been watching you for quite a while? and then encouraged you, I guess, to go in a certain direction. So what area was that in for you? And was it you that decided, or did they decide? Sorry, my dog, my neighbor's dog.
That's all right. Obviously, they were tailor making this reality for me to function inside of their boundaries that they set up for me. But they also wanted me to explore just gifting and talents. So I kind of lean towards the elemental first.
So what was that for you?
Well,
How
the
did
very
that work?
first thing that I was drawn to was fire. That we have to talk about the things that the separation between those powers, the air and the earth. I won't explain it in super detail, but I was also very much steeped in pagan mythology, Norse mythology to be specific. And those are the runes that I learned, was the Norse runes. That was the very first magic I learned, was rune magic.
Wow, ruin.
How old were you then when you started learning the Norse mythology? Because I'm very interested about that, because a lot of what we see in the training is that as we go along, it has a lot to do. Gosh, these dogs! Sorry, it has a lot to do with that Norse. I don't know if the right word is the Viking type training, that Viking energy, if you will, that has that also accompanies a lot of what we're seeing, and I'm sure we'll get into that as well. But more in terms of, when did you start learning the Norse mythology? Did that go along with the training? I mean, I think obviously you would have had physical training as well as spiritual training, right?
I think you're on mute, Caleb.
Okay, it looks like Caleb's on mute. I know he might also just have. He's also got doggies, so okay, but very interesting. I'll just wait for him. But wow, how absolutely interesting. You know what really fascinates me about this is, again, I've been so fascinated with Caleb's story for such a long time, well, since we started speaking, really, in terms of how he's able, how these guys choose these kids, these gifted kids, and how they so seductively put them into these programs, making the kids believe it's their choice. And it is, just to enhance their natural abilities. But the manipulation around this is absolutely of the highest level. Anyway, Caleb, sorry, I see you back on again.
Yeah, sorry about that. I started to learn Norse mythology when I was very young. So I had a Norwegian grandmother that spoke often about my heritage, native and German. And there's a lot of stories in those sagas that talk of them coming to here, but way before Christopher Columbus ever did, and how they intermingled and interacted with natives. So they were fascinated by that, actually. So I had to learn both of the elder and the younger runic languages. And I started to celebrate the blood rituals, not rituals, but blood celebrations. They call them blots. Blot is blood in German.
When you say you were celebrating the blood rituals, what does that mean?
They weren't rituals. It's just a blood, like a celebration. You've heard of something being a thing, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's a Norse tradition. A thing is a meeting where they get together and they talk business. It's like a yearly or sometimes a monthly meeting. That's what those blots were. And blots weren't just because they were shedding blood or something else like that. It was the sharing of mutual blood. Like you're all the same people, not we're cutting chickens' heads off and spraying it around or whatever.
Yeah. Wow. So that obviously, when you say, okay, so you were young when you started that. How did that dovetail with the other training you were doing? I mean, is there a link in all of this, I guess is what I'm asking, that we're not really aware of as outsiders looking in? It just seems to me that these things are very linked, and a lot of it is linked to the Norse roots.
Right. Well, I would say the link was back when the guy who wrote the first sagas was a Catholic priest, and he integrated a lot of Norse mythology into the Catholic religion as you know it today. So there's a link there as far as magic goes. Again, it's so hard to just explain it with words. Some of it has to be shown almost, but with the magic stuff, it's basically the same powers. I think I told you that last time. The same pantheon of gods and demigods, basically, just different names. So that was the commonality.
So I think that is very interesting, because when we look at a lot of these mythological figures, you know, whether it's Greek, Roman, Egyptian, anything like that, you know, we're seeing really they're pretty much the same. Each one means something different. Well, it means the same thing, different name for different cultures, but really one and the same thing, right? Is that coming from there, that whole Christian intervention, or the Catholic intervention, rather, as you say, when the Catholics started that, really they integrated the Norse mythology into the Catholic teachings, right?
Right, and it was to get them to be the religious Catholics they wanted, I think, without taking everything away from them in terms of their celebrations, their blots. All the celebrations you see now as holidays were all Norse blots. Every single one of them.
So, in your opinion, I mean, I'm really interested to hear what you say about this, because, you know, when we're looking at the runes and stuff like that, that type of music, there's a lot of, you know, we're looking at the ancient Viking type movies, history, stuff like that. There's a lot of violence and a lot of blood relating to that. Is that all there is to the Norse mythology, blood? Because we look at the Vikings and we kind of, what springs to mind is people at war, right? Is there another side to that, I guess is what I'm asking. I mean, I believe there's another side to everything. There's two sides to everything. And then there's the center, right? Is there another side of the Norse mythology that is good, so to speak, that doesn't entail sacrificing, making blood sacrifices to the gods, the goddesses, that sort of thing? I'm just interested to know, from what you've experienced, what you say about that.
Well, they're very family-centric, they're very faith-oriented, and they're very into what they do, more so than most other people that you meet. Some people say, well, this is what I am, and then they don't follow through with anything, and they don't actively participate in anything that's faith-based. No matter which God you're looking at, I follow a God that's true, and I do so without remorse, without repentance. Other people say they do, but they don't.
Yeah, I love actually how you look at that, because it makes Makes a lot of sense. I think we get so wrapped up in the details, so to speak, that we really forget there is only really one true God. And at the end of the day, that's where, when we're aligned with that, that's how we get through these things. Faith, right? Isn't that what it's all about? Faith.
You have to ask yourself what faith is too. And I learned from the Norse just exactly what that was and what that means, because they believe it 100%. They don't have any doubt what they believe. They live that way, and that's kind of how we have to live our way. When you are renewed by God through His Son and that blood sacrifice that He made, it was the one time only gift that was given to us as free as can be.
Wow. Very true. I'm just seeing any other questions before we move on. Okay, Renee McCrae. Are the Catholic saints derived from Norse gods?
No, the veneration of saints isn't necessarily derived from the Norse gods, but it is derived from the Norse belief that once they went to Valhalla, there's a whole hall of people just waiting for you there. And you can name them by name, and you can interact with them by virtue of the fact that they will bless you with something. So it wasn't necessarily derived from gods, but it was derived from that ancestor belief.
Okay. Wow. Great. So are you able to speak to us further in terms of where it went from there for you? What was there any other training that opened up for you? Obviously going through the initiations. What came after that then?
Well, to further explain the schools of magic that I went to, they're real places. This is not spiritual. This is a place you can actually go to. I had my chosen path was the pagan route. There's a lot of different ways you can go about it, but it's tailor made for you, your experience. It's like a tailor made suit or dress or pair of shoes or gloves or whatever, a fitted hat. It's the difference between the earth and the air spirits, which I knew as the Aesir was the air and the Vanir was the earth. And I chose the earth path first. And to do that, when I first walked through that door, I could see those runes in the way that they were put together. They're called bind runes. It's a combination of runes that create a spell. And I wasn't in the know about spell casting or spellcraft at the time, so I had to try to figure out what they meant. The individual runes mean individual things. When you put them into combination with each other, they become something different, more powerful or dangerous or blessing or whatever you want to call it. So I had to be able to identify what that was. They don't take you to those trials unless they think you're ready. So you get to play in the big sandbox for a while first. You get familiar with this stuff first, and your mind, body, and spirit become more aligned, more rejoined instead of being broken apart.
When you say they kind of came alive for you, and okay, let me try and understand what you're saying. So they come to life, right? It's not static anymore. Kind of it takes on a life of its own. The runes, and then how they fit together or combine with each other is then what you've got to figure out what the message is or what they're trying to say to you. Is that right?
Based on what I knew of the runes, it wasn't so much figuring out what they were trying to say to me. It was trying to figure out the combination of words they were using. If I suddenly started talking backwards, it wouldn't make sense to you at all, right?
Right.
But if I'm speaking like I am now, you understand me.
Yes.
If I was to break off and start speaking my native tongue, you would have no clue what I was saying. So it's kind of along those lines.
Right. how did you get to figure it out eventually?
Well, it was just experience, just going into it as many times as I could. And the lessons were intensive only because I wanted to learn the blots. I wanted to be an active participant in the blots.
When you say the lessons were intensive, what type of lessons are we talking?
The runic language is very difficult to learn at first. If you can't understand it, it's literally everywhere around you. Where you look, you see those runes everywhere, and it was hard to understand that at first.
Wow. I'm interested to know as well, when you say they, obviously there would have been people that were coordinating this. Who are they? Who is the they? Can you tell us anything about who they is or were or are?
That's something I'd like to talk about some other time, not right now.
Okay, no problem. All right, great. Okay, so if we can just continue along the line then about the initiations and stuff like that. So then you start learning the ancient languages, the rune languages. You start learning how it works. Where does that take you?
Like I said, we were in the big sandbox. We basically were just given a bunch of toys to play with, basically, if you think of it that way. We were learning simple spellcraft without even knowing what it was. So they'd leave a scrap of paper here or a book open over there or something drawn in the sand on the beach that you go to or whatever. And since you're learning the language and you can read it, if you can read it, you can say it. If you can say it, then you can cast it. So that was the sequence of events, at least for me.
Which is why I know that you often mentioned in the past on the show, and I know in our conversations as well, you've made that very, very clear how important it is that we, what we, I guess, think, feel, write, and speak has a lot of power. So literally the spell crafting, yeah?
Exactly. It has everything to do with what happens to you, actually. One way or another, you're having faith in something good or bad. So you have to be very careful with what you say. I don't say the word hate very often. When I do, it's because I have actual genuine feelings about that. You shouldn't just bandy those words about like it's nothing. At some point, you have to be accountable for what you say and what you do.
Yeah, that's so true. But wouldn't that also just be sort of, energetic anyway? Because if we understand that our bodies literally are created from sound, frequency, and vibration, and whatever emotion you're feeling out, in the body, and if you're feeling that intense hatred, and especially if it's a consistent thing, right? You kind of make yourself sick. You're going to make yourself sick. You're going to put yourself in a situation where you are opening yourself up to receiving all sorts of dodgy attachments and things, right? Do you agree with that?
I do, actually. What you say has an awful lot to do with your well-being. And if you're not a believer and you're just a person out there, you don't know that you're doing this to yourself. And when you claim stuff like this is my cancer, this is my problem, this is my issue, this is my addiction, you're claiming that. You're laying claim to it. You're having faith that it is yours. Why would you do that to yourself? You have to change the inner way of thinking to protect yourself. That goes back to the boundaries thing again. They taught us not to do that so that we wouldn't fall into these things.
Wow. It's so interesting, about when you talk about that spell casting, etc. It brings my mind to this whole, is it Alcoholics Anonymous, AA, NA, Narcotics Anonymous, whatever it is.
Right.
You stand up and the first thing you say is, hello, my name is so-and-so and I'm an addict. I mean, I have never seen the good in that. I mean, I can understand that you have to acknowledge that you maybe have a problem with an addiction right now. But I'm one that doesn't, I mean, I believe any addiction can be broken. I really do. And so you're really just reaffirming your inability to overcome the addiction, in my opinion. Would you say that's right from what you're telling us here?
I would say that's absolutely correct. Just reinforcing something negative. And if other people believe that about you too, when does it ever break for you? Because you're telling yourself that and other people are reinforcing that belief with you. I would rather hear some positivity and have a break from the negative energy coming at me. If that was me in that position, that's what I would be asking for. And that's what I try to give other people. I'm not perfect. Trust me, I'm not perfect. But that's something that I strive for.
Wow. It makes such sense. And, I mean, it really is a no-brainer if we think about it, guys. I mean, let's think about it. I mean, really, hello, I'm so-and-so and I'm an addict. You keep yourself in that time loop again, right? I would even call that a time loop, right? Where you just go through this. And it's very interesting because in a lot of those meetings, and I often come under fire for my big mouth, but in a lot of these meetings, every few minutes, every 20 minutes, there's a smoke break where everyone's puffing away on a cigarette and talking about the meds that they are on. So like literally they've now gone from, let's say, cocaine or whatever it is, or alcohol that they were addicted to now prescription drugs. So you're literally transferring the addiction, and then you're saying, well, my name is so-and-so and I'm an addict. Would that not also just be reaffirming everything? Because it's evident. As long as you're off the illegal drugs, you're good, right?
Right. It's madness when I think about it, because you're absolutely correct. They're just putting people onto another addiction that they have to pay more money for. And it just keeps you in that endless loop. So that's actually a good example of a time loop.
Very good. Makes sense.
So how would you, from your knowledge in terms of that, how would you, if you had to now start up a group, for example, for people who's suffering from addictions, what would be your advice as to how, in terms of spell words, spell casting, etc., what would be your advice for people how to address themselves actually and the world? What would be the thing that you would say to us we should use?
Well, the first thing I do is I'd find out where they're at spiritually and mentally and physically. Some of those addictions are definitely physical addictions. And if you just cold turkey somebody, they can die, especially on opiates or something like that. And so you have to be careful with what you do there. But once you find out what's going on with them emotionally, spiritually, or let's say in their soul, in their spirit, in their body, then you can kind of tailor make something for them where they just start to talk positive. It's amazing. Look at pictures of snowflakes that were frozen with grating music. The snowflakes look all distorted and bad, and some beautiful music, and they're perfectly formed. So that tells you that the sound has a lot to do with things.
Absolutely.
You can fake sound. You can say something out loud all you want to, but if you don't believe it, it's not going to be like you think. In fact, you might poison yourself worse.
I agree. Trying to it's such a contradiction in terms, it's like the head and the heart, right? The head says that, the heart says that, and you literally pulling yourself apart, trying to figure out what to do or how to do it or what to believe or what to choose, right? So really, at the end of the day, it's that split of unknowing or not knowing, or that uncertainty, that it seems to me that these cracks in our soul, if you will, would create that space for these negative entities and things to start.
Well, it goes back to the old saying about unity. You know, house divided against itself will fall. Well, you are a house. You are a temple all by yourself. You have a soul and a spirit within that flesh meat suit that you drive around all day. So think about that for a minute. If your house is divided against itself, it will fall. If it's reunited with itself using the love of God and accepting his mercy, it's not, and you'll stand. That's not the very first thing I tell them. I just try to see where they're at first, though, and go from there.
Absolutely. And I think it's just it's such a good thing to break free from that. I'm an addict. I'm free, I'm free. It's amazing to be able to move forward from that path. And I think the more we see this stuff, the more we realize exactly how all these things have been manipulated, right? All these systems like AA, NA, whatever it is, it really is just part of the system that keeps people within that Groundhog Day, so to speak. Yeah?
Correct. I'm not here to naysay any specific anything. I'm just saying what you say has a lot to do with what happens to you.
Absolutely.
So in this big sandbox, when we find these scraps of paper or books or whatever they were trying to show us there, this is in that. I'm going to stop calling it lucid dreaming, because it was basically just spirit travel, astral projection. That's what it morphed into after a while. You learned how to read what was on those books and those scraps of paper or whatever they're showing us. Sometimes it was scratching on a tree, like somebody carved "I love you" on a tree, right? Sometimes it was that way. Just simple lessons. We learned how to cast and open portals to go from here to there. So we were able to come out of the big sandbox at will and step into this world again without having to be asleep. We could do it while we were awake. So they were teaching us how to be conscious for these actions.
This must have been quite cool for the kids there. As a kid, this must be pretty cool, right?
Well, of course. That's probably why they chose children to do it, because adults would have a problem with that.
Wow. So they're teaching you to live in both worlds, in this multidimensional world. So
they called it half in, half out.
Yeah, I was going to say you're 1 foot in, 1 foot out, right? And
Correct.
So you learn to navigate both worlds. Wow. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Wow. Caleb, I know we're kind of nearing the end of our time here, but I'm not sure. If you're happy to carry on a bit, if there's anything else you can share about your training or anything that you still experienced between that time that, from the wild hunt to before. I know you went to the military after that, and I know we want to hear about that most certainly. But is there anything else that you can share with us, maybe other training, anything interesting from those years of your life?
Well, in a physical sense, I was also introduced to the martial arts. And everybody thinks kung fu fighting. You hear that song playing in your head as soon as somebody says that. But it wasn't just that. It was also the spiritual discipline that those arts offered, to calm yourself, to focus yourself, to focus your inner energy from the earth to something that you're trying to do. I'm not trying to say that that's good. I'm just saying that that's what they taught us through, at least me and a few others that I knew. So that was 11, 12, 13 years old when I started to do that. And there was different kinds of that art. My chosen one was Kendo, which is Japanese sword fighting, and Jiu-Jitsu.
How far did you get in those arts? I mean, obviously you would have been graded, so I would imagine you would have gone pretty far, right?
Well, I practiced for about 3 years, so I also had an introduction to historical European martial arts, which is sword fighting. So it was a lot to do. I was always busy doing something when I was young, so I never really had a spare moment to myself. So
Wow. That's why I say, I mean, as a kid, I would imagine for myself, if I was being taught these cool tricks, right, where you can dream and you get to see these things half in, half out. I mean, this is very alluring for a kid. I mean, and at the same time, they're telling you how special you are all the time, right? How I'm trying to just wrap my head around the fact that your abuse started at a very young age, right? What you were saying from the age of 5. So how did you manage to have that kind of trauma, right? But at the same time, they pushing you in these programs where you really are pushed to succeed. You obviously encouraged. You told that you have something that someone else doesn't have. But yet on the flip side of that, on another level, when no one's watching, you experience intense abuse from them. How did you deal with that? How was that for you? Can you explain how you managed to manage that as a kid?
well, again, I think it's what they were intentionally doing all along anyway. Make you powerless and give you power. And make the power so intense and so amazing that you can overcome the pain and everything else. It drives you forward. It pushes you into corners you didn't think you would go into, to do things you didn't think you'd do. I see somebody asked about age for blood sacrifice and that kind of thing. That started about 11. But the very first sacrifice that was made by Charlotta in that box. And that blood powered these learning years. That sacrifice powered these learning years.
For you. So that was an automatic sacrifice for you. So you gained from that. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Wow. How incredible. I think it's, when we look at these things as well in that way, it's like, sure, I'm battling to find the words, so I'm sorry about that. That whole, I would imagine that pain and the humiliation of the abuse, whether it's sexual, whether it's mental, whether it's physical, whether it's whatever it is, would have created such a rage in a child, right? That when they build you up, it's almost like that rage would also be the thing that fuels your success. Would that be, it just occurred to me, would that be part of the reason for the torture and the abuse of kids, so that they can use that energy and direct it into something so great as what you were being groomed for?
Absolutely. That's how they do it in the military. When they first induct you, is they break you down and they replace you with something else. You're still you to some degree, but you also become indoctrinated. And this was much more intense than any military training I ever took. Much more personal. It was also something they held over me, like blackmail, kind of. I didn't know what blackmail was when I was 10, so I didn't call it that then, but there was a great deal of shame involved with that as well.
Can you speak to us about that shame that they would have put on you as a child of 10 already after that incident? Because I would imagine that would have been where a lot of shaming started. Can you speak to us a bit on that?
Basically, it was, you know what you did in there. We know what you did in there. Wink. You know, that kind of shaming, just like the sexual abuse. Because after a time with the sexual abuse, I was an active participant. I wasn't just abused. You know, obviously your body responds to these kinds of things, and that was a huge amount of shame for me, was that. So both ways they get you, and they make no effort to try to not remind you. They remind you every chance they get just what you're about and what you've done. And if you don't play the game with them, they'll expose you or they'll reveal something about you.
So it's true then that they would videotape or stuff like that, and they would hold that against you, even as a kid?
Yes. Yep. Remember, I had a number painted on my chest, and I was traded like a baseball card.
Wow, wow, wow. I mean, this is just absolutely insane. Are you good to carry on a while?
Yeah, I
Sorry.
feel like I'm missing out on so many things to say here. It's going to take more than just one show, I think, for sure, on everything we talk about. But
yeah, no, absolutely.
I feel like I'm left hanging. I'm the one that's telling it.
Shame. No, I think it's really amazing because again, it just shows me, we hear all these stories all this time, what they do to the kids, and it's almost surreal to hear your story that you've been, one of these kids that has really been taken in and forced to participate in these absolute horrors, and how the mind is twisted and broken and contorted is quite beyond me. But then, again, I just see the human spirit in someone like yourself, and how amazing and strong and resilient we really are. When you, as you say, have faith. I think faith is one of the biggest things that we spoke about here. And I think we advocate that a lot, yeah?
Yes, we do. I'll briefly fast forward in time to some of my military training, some of the things that I went through. One thing that they tell you is you're telling your mind that your body can do a whole lot more than you think it can. And you just convinced your mind that you can do it. And that literally meant almost anything. Freezing cold, hot, starving, running hard, climbing, falling, being shot at, being blown up, watching your friends die, killing people. That was one of the ways that they prepared me for that experience, because I took it as far as you possibly can on this earth. We'll talk about that sometime later.
Yeah, indeed. Wow. Well, Caleb, I absolutely so look forward to hearing the rest of your story. And yes, there's a lot for us to go into as well, just on these topics that we've spoken about here. I mean, just in, the spiritual disciplines, the martial arts, the elements, what there is to learn, or was for you to learn through all of that. And I think it's absolutely fascinating because, again, so many of us are so oblivious to this stuff going on. And, when I look back now and I realize, when I think about someone like yourself, Jesse, Tom, all these people, here I was as a kid living my life, innocent and complaining that my mother was shouting at me too much. But, then so many of our children went through stuff like you went through, and coming out now. So again, I want to just say thank you so much for sharing your story with us and giving us the information that we really need to be aware of, because knowledge is power. And once we know what's going on, I think it's also important because we can understand things better. And the next time we see a veteran, I've got lots of respect for veterans. I don't care what nationality or country they are from. When you see someone who's fought that fight, We know you guys have been through a lot. So thank you again.
With the elemental, that's how I learned about the tree sprites. I learned about water spirits. I learned about things that live in the dirt itself. Like I said, there's an absolute massive amount of information to talk about just on that one subject. I quickly learned to be afraid of the Christmas tree after that, because those things are nasty. They're not nice at all.
Can you tell us the Christmas sprite story before we end off, please? You leave it as hanging.
Yes.
I'm trying not to. I'd love to just dump everything on the table so you could just examine it yourself, but even that would be dangerous. But if you look into the older stories about the Christmas tree and that tradition, it goes back to the holly, the mistletoe, all that kind of stuff. These are some of the ancient druid stuff that they used to do that did involve human sacrifice. And once I figured out there's something in that tree, I used to hate going into the room where that tree was. And I remember, I don't use the word hate lightly. It used to bother the crap on me. And I always had more nightmares every Christmas, every single time they put that tree up. And it doesn't have to be a living tree or a cut down tree. It can be a fake tree even. It's a representation of what that is and what it means. When they brought gifts to that thing, they were bringing sacrifices to that spirit in the tree itself. You hang lights on there. The lights represent stars. The tinsel represents wormholes or pathways through the stars. And the globes represent realms.
That's insane. And I'm sure, it's amazing because in my family, Christmas, my mother's German. So we followed the German Christmas tradition of Christmas Eve. And if I think about how many trees and lights and globes and tinsels we put up, it's amazing. So tell us a little bit about the tree sprite, right? Why were you scared of that? Is it tree spirit or a tree sprite? I think that's what you call it, right? A tree sprite.
I called it a sprite. That's what I heard it called before. It was a sprite.
So can you tell us about the Christmas tree sprite?
Well, the manifestations I saw were it's almost another subject that we're going to get into eventually here, hopefully soon, is the golems. They could appear in a pile of garbage, in a dust storm. And they were very hateful of us. No matter what level of power we were at, they hated us. They weren't friendly to us whatsoever. So I didn't talk to them. I just spent a lot of time warding myself, warding, W-A-R-D-I-N-G, to not be harmed or affected by them. And once I grew powerful enough to not be affected by them, then I started to harm them back, so to speak. So, but they could look almost like anything. Like I said, the golem is going to be something we'll have to talk about to understand that fully.
So golem as in Lord of the Rings?
Golem, G-O-L-E-M, as in the Hebrew version. That touches on homunculus.
Wow.
I didn't want to say that word out loud, but now I've said it. So.
Wow, that's amazing. So are there good ones as well, like the tree sprites? Are there good sprites? Are there bad ones? I guess there would be both, right?
That's an interesting question because that brings back the fall. When you consider that 1/3 of heaven fell, they also brought their minions with them. I personally never spent a lot of time in dark forests trying to find good spirits. I just assumed they were all bad, but that was my assumption. So I couldn't tell you if they were good or bad. I know in heaven there's good ones still. In the heavenly realm, there's still good trees, still good spirits. A good lot of them fell here.
Right.
And they're associated with the tree. The tree itself does not have evil or good in it. It's just the spirit that lives in the tree. It's like its body, kind of, if you think of it that way.
Yeah. And we never know what we're dealing with, right? Because they can go either way, from what I'm understanding, right?
Yes. And you hear so many stories about the dark woods, the evil woods. You hear about that a lot. And if you've ever been into it in any kind of dark forest, you definitely know that there's something not correct being there. And you're in danger, actually. You've heard of walking trees, haven't you?
Yes.
Trees that move, that kind of thing. That's the tree sprite moving that tree around.
I can't help but go to Lord of the Rings here, because everything you're talking about is really what we saw in Lord of the Rings. And I think it was it the last one? I don't know if there were 3 or 4, whatever, where these trees start walking and they actually start, but before that, they're really just neutral. They're in the forest, they're not doing anything. And then suddenly they start walking and they start taking action. What is that about?
Well, it's like any war. You can be as neutral as you want to be until someone's trying to kill you, or trying to do something to you somehow.
Right.
So warfare is like that. I mean, this is a war in heaven. At some point, you have to pick a side. You can't stay neutral. You can't stay in the gray zone. You have to pick a side. So they did. They picked either or good. Like I said, I never spent a lot of time trying to figure out if they were good or not. I just stayed away from them.
Wow.
There's 1,000 trees that you're outnumbered.
Wow. Wow. That's amazing. And I really look forward to hearing more about that as we go along.
If you look at some places on Earth, they're clearing those trees down because it's associated with evil more than it is a profitable experience. Those trees are.
What places are we talking about now? Because when we're looking at the recent fires in the rainforest, right? Australia has recently, what was it, maybe 2-3 years ago now, those devastating fires. Not that Australia has much forest, but or maybe they do actually. But it's like, are you saying that they are clearing tree spirits?
Yes, they're just getting rid of them so that they can perform different magical, not ceremonies, but different magical. I'm not sure what you want to call it. I hate to say ceremonies because then you think it's a ceremony, but like a ceremony.
Okay, so they get rid of some trees, or let's say a forest, which then gets rid of obviously all the trees along with the sprites that inhabited them. So now they're planting new ones, doing, I would imagine that when they're therefore then planting these trees, they would have specific rituals that they're doing to bring in different sprites that are going to work better for them, right? Is that what you're saying?
Right, they just move them into different areas. The tree goes down, but the sprite stays. And they can hurt it, so to speak. It's not an animal, but it's similar to something like that.
Oh.
Wow. So they actually steal the sprite. They can take the sprite of the tree by destroying it.
You can take the sprite, you can take the spirit or the soul of just about anything that lives or walks or crawls and use it for different purpose.
And please help me understand then, what do they do with the spirit of the tree or the bushes or whatever it is?
You've heard of a magical staff or a wand before, I'm sure. What do you think powers those things?
Wow.
No way.
You learn how to encapsulate, entrap, tap the power, enchant, and then use that device.
So would that spirit that's then in the wand be a captured spirit? it's not something natural that's coming from God or your good zappity doodah energy. This is a separate captured spirit, tree sprite, that's sitting in a wand.
Correct. And it doesn't always agree with you that it wants to be there or not. They're powerful,
Shit.
and it's not something that you just keep in your back pocket. Now, that's also used in conjunction with soul gems or soul crystals. So now you're talking about magnification of power. The sprite all by itself is one thing. But you put a couple soul gems or crystals in different combinations. Remember, there's different kinds of crystal, all different kinds. They'll do different things.
Wow.
And
I suppose how you line them up.
You're kind of encapsulating that spirit, and it's not happy about that. So it's always trying to get out. So you give it a focal point to get out with, where it actually can't get out, but it releases some of its energy.
And can it kill the other person then? Obviously, if we see
it can kill the user. You have to be very, very, very powerful and very, very, very protected to do that.
Is it possible you have a good spirit? I guess, because they could be either. Let's say, okay, let's talk Lord of the Rings here. Let's talk Gandalf, right? Who's a good guy. So he's in his wand, he's holding a spirit, a sprite in his wand that he will use to zap whatever. So can we safely assume then that the sprite in his wand is from a good tree that wants to do good?
Think of it in terms of the old cartoon of the big bulldog and the little small dog with a hat on. Spike and whatever. Spike would jump over, or the little dog would jump over the big dog. So there's always going to be a bigger fish. There's always something more powerful than you. The same would be true for these sprites. If you want to overcome a sprite, you take something with you that's more powerful than that sprite. That's how you capture them. It doesn't have much to do with good or evil. It's all a power thing.
Mm.
How sad, hey?
Yeah, it's sad. I don't think any sprite wants to be in a staff. It's like,
I don't think anything would want to be in a staff.
Yeah, I think
neither in a crystal, neither in a med bed.
No.
Wow. This is Wow, Caleb, really,
This is just an introduction to some of this stuff. So it goes a whole lot deeper than that. Again, I'm not anxious to teach any of this, but this is just touching on one subject in one kind of the 6 magics that I know of. So one subject.
When we're talking about, because we know that sex magic is something that is very prevalent in the dark world, would it always be about actually having some kind of a sexual experience with the person, or God forbid, I know kids as well? Is it always an act, the actual physical act of some kind of sexual act? Or can it be energetic as well?
Well, for anybody who's ever had sex, you know that it's a powerful experience. It's life-altering, life-changing. You can have children as a result. It's a creative act that we are given as a gift. It wasn't given to other spirits. They corrupted and stole it from us for the most part, but we're the ones that have that gift. It's the power of creation. So when they do that act, it's a quick and easy and almost, I hate to say the words cheap, but cheap form of energy that doesn't involve capturing dangerous wild spirits. Children are used the most because they're defenseless.
Yeah. And animals too.
And animals too.
Wow.
In fact,
Well,
in capturing souls, animals were the first ones that I practiced on. I was taking the animal's soul.
Wow. I think it's absolutely incredible that you're sharing this knowledge with us, because this is stuff that we don't hear about every day. And I know that you're very vulnerable and you're sharing deep truths with us. And I just want to say thank you for that. We really appreciate that. So I want to know, I think we will maybe call it a day for today, Caleb, unless there's something else you would like to share with us.
Well, there's lots I'd like to share with you. There's just not enough time in the day.
Yeah.
Lots I want to hear. Lots we all want to hear.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well,
Well, is there anything you
lot of different trails, a lot of different trails you can go down to see all this information. So this is why we pray before the show and after, is because I want people to know but not be harmed by this. Some of this stuff is extremely dangerous. There's nothing to play games with, nothing to toy around with. If you invoke any of these things, those things will show up. So you have to be mindful of that when you're dealing with this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Most important thing I can ever say is watch what you say. Watch the words in your mouth, because you're going to be accountable for them at one point in this existence or the next.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Wow, thank you so much. I'm just looking at our chat section here. I want to just see if there's anything. Yeah, I think we've
Any
pretty
pressing
much...
questions?
Not sure there's anything that's come up now, but we will check. And if there's anything that we've missed out, we will follow up with on Sunday, because we're seeing you again on Sunday, same time, yeah?
Sure.
Perfect.
And I think on Sunday we're going to be talking about Cabbage Patch Babies. Very interesting one, right? You good with that?
Yes, I am.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Well, Caleb, on that note, maybe you just, if there's anything else you'd like to close with, otherwise if you can just close for us in prayer, please, that'd be greatly appreciated.
All right. Heavenly Father, we thank you for today again. Thank you for information. Thank you for helping us find truth and freedom in information. I ask that you bless all these people who have come here to watch today and to learn and to be in the know of these things. I ask that you protect them, that you bless them richly with everything they need and want, if that's what your will is for them. I thank you for your love. Thank you for your faithfulness to us. And I honor your name above everything else. Just ask you for the continued blessing of good rest and peace for all of us. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, really. Wow. And I want to just say thank you to our beautiful viewers for joining us today on our 4th show with Caleb. Really getting into some deep stuff. We're touching on all sorts of crazy things in the system that he learned along the way. We'll be going more into that as the weeks go on, as well as his experience in the United States military. Military. Caleb, say military. Say it.
Military.
He says it so nicely. Not military. Okay. Okay, guys. Thank you so much for watching us. God bless you all. Please like, share, subscribe, leave us comments. Caleb is very happy to answer any questions if you guys have them. And you know, we'll be going along and just progressing, because I know we're looking at sort of doing some groups where Caleb will be answering some specific questions for you guys as well. We can do live chat, stuff like that with Caleb, but we will do that as we go along. If there's any questions in the meantime, as I said, he is open and he's happy to answer anything. But otherwise, we shall see you Sunday at the same time. Take good care, everybody. Thank you so much. God bless you all. See you soon. Thank you, Caleb. Thanks, Monet.
Thank you, Ken. Bye.